What happens when a prince walks into a talk show thinking he owns the place, only to meet a host who refuses to bow down? Well, you're about to witness one of the most explosive television moments ever captured, where royal entitlement collides. Head first with New York attitude. Before we dive into this absolute train wreck, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below because trust me, you're going to have opinions about what you're about to see. The View studio buzzed with its usual pre-show energy, but today carried an extra charge of anticipation. Prince Harry, the Duke of Sussex himself, was scheduled to appear as Joy Behar's guest for what was supposed to be a straightforward promotional interview about his latest charitable endeavors. The production team had been briefed extensively about royal protocol, the proper way to address him, and the topics that were absolutely off-limits. What they hadn't prepared for was Harry's mood that particular morning. Joy Behar, veteran of countless interviews and never one to be intimidated by status or titles, sat across from Harry in the familiar studio setting. Her notes were organized, her questions prepared, but she could sense something was different about this guest from the moment he walked onto the set. There was an edge to him, a tension that seemed to radiate outward and fill the space between them. "Your Royal Highness," Joy began with her characteristic directness. "Let's talk about your foundation's work with veterans. It's clearly something close to your heart, given your own military service." Harry shifted in his chair, his jaw tightening slightly. "Actually, Joy, I'd prefer if we could skip the formal titles. Just Harry is fine." His tone carried an undertone that suggested this wasn't really a request, but more of a correction, delivered with the kind of authority that expected immediate compliance. Joy raised an eyebrow, but continued smoothly. "Of course, Harry. So tell us about the programs you're developing." "Well," Harry began, but then paused, his eyes scanning the studio as if he was just now taking in his surroundings. "I have to say, I'm a bit surprised by the setup here. In most of my interviews, especially the more serious ones, there's usually a bit more, how should I put this, gravitas to the environment." The comment hung in the air like a challenge. Joy's expression didn't change, but those who knew her well could detect the slight tightening around her eyes that signaled her patience was already being tested. "I'm sorry, what exactly are you suggesting about our show?" Joy asked, her voice maintaining its professional tone while carrying just enough edge to let Harry know he was treading on thin ice. Harry leaned back in his chair with a slight smirk. "Oh, nothing personal, Joy. It's just that when you're used to sitting down with, say, Oprah or Anderson Cooper, you develop certain expectations about the caliber of discourse. I'm sure you understand." The studio fell silent except for the hum of cameras and equipment. Production assistants exchanged glances, sensing that this interview was already veering far from the scripted talking points they'd prepared. Joy Behar, however, had been in television long enough to know when a guest was trying to establish dominance, and she wasn't about to let some entitled royal walk all over her show. "Actually, Harry, I think what our viewers understand is that they tune in to hear honest conversations, not rehearsed talking points delivered in stuffy environments. So why don't we try that approach and see how it goes?" Harry's smile faltered for just a moment before returning, but now it carried a distinctly colder quality. "Of course, Joy. Though I do hope you'll understand that some topics require a certain level of sophistication to discuss properly." "Sophistication," Joy repeated, letting the word hang in the air. "Right. Well, let's start with something that should be right in your wheelhouse then. Your foundation's latest initiative, what's the actual impact been? Not the press release version, the real numbers." "I think the press releases speak for themselves, Joy. The media coverage has been quite extensive, and the public response has been overwhelmingly positive." Joy leaned forward slightly. "That's not what I asked. I asked about impact, about actual results. How many veterans have you directly helped? What measurable changes have occurred because of your work?" Harry's posture stiffened. "Joy, I think you're missing the bigger picture here. The work we do operates on a level that can't always be reduced to simple statistics. We're talking about changing hearts and minds, about shifting cultural perspectives." "Oh, I see," Joy said, her tone now carrying a hint of sarcasm that regular viewers would immediately recognize. "So when people donate money to your foundation, they shouldn't expect measurable results, just good feelings and cultural shifts. Is that the royal approach to charity work?" The tension in the studio was now palpable. Harry's media training, had prepared him for tough questions, but it hadn't prepared him for a host who refused to be impressed by his status or intimidated by his position. Joy, I think you're being deliberately obtuse. The work we do is complex and nuanced. Perhaps if you'd done a bit more research before this interview, you'd better understand the scope of what we're accomplishing. Joy's eyebrows shot up. Excuse me? Are you suggesting I don't know how to prepare for an interview? Harry, I've been doing this since before you were born. I've interviewed presidents, prime ministers, and yes, even royalty. And what I've learned is that the guests who spend the most time talking about how important their work is usually have the least to show for it. Harry's face flushed slightly. That's quite an accusation, Joy. I'd be careful about making statements like that without evidence to back them up. Evidence? Joy leaned back and crossed her arms. You just spent 5 minutes telling me that your work can't be measured by evidence, that it's all about feelings and cultural shifts. Which is it, Your Highness? The use of his title, delivered with just enough emphasis to make it sound almost mocking, clearly struck a nerve. Harry's carefully maintained composure began to crack. I think there's been a misunderstanding here. Joy, I came on this show as a courtesy to discuss important work that's making a real difference in people's lives. I didn't come here to be attacked or to have my motives questioned by someone who clearly has their own agenda. Joy's laugh was sharp and genuine. My agenda? Harry, my agenda is to ask questions that my viewers want answered. And right now, they're probably wondering why a prince who claims to care about veterans can't give a straight answer about how many he's actually helped. This is ridiculous, Harry muttered, loud enough for the microphones to pick up. In England, journalists understand the importance of respectful discourse. Well, lucky for both of us, we're not in England. Joy shot back immediately. We're in New York, where we ask follow-up questions and we don't bow to anyone, royal or otherwise. Harry's eyes flashed with indignation at Joy's comment about not bowing to anyone. The carefully crafted public persona he'd spent years developing was rapidly dissolving under the studio lights, replaced by something much more raw and entitled. You know what, Joy? I think I understand the problem here. You're so used to dealing with politicians and celebrities who need your platform that you've forgotten how to show basic respect to someone who's actually making a difference in the world. Joy's expression shifted from professional skepticism to genuine disbelief. Basic respect? Harry, respect is earned through actions, not inherited through bloodlines. And right now, you're acting like a spoiled child who's upset that someone dared to ask you to back up your claims. Spoiled child. Harry's voice rose noticeably. Do you have any idea what I've sacrificed for my humanitarian work? What I've given up? I walked away from a life of privilege to dedicate myself to causes that matter. Oh, please, Joy interjected, her New York accent becoming more pronounced as her patience wore thin. You walked away from one form of privilege into another. You've got multi-million-dollar deals with streaming platforms, you live in a mansion in California, and you lecture the rest of us about sacrifice. Give me a break. The studio crew exchanged increasingly worried glances. This was spiraling far beyond anything they'd anticipated, and the interview was being broadcast live to millions of viewers who were witnessing a complete meltdown in real time. Harry stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. I don't have to sit here and listen to this. Do you know who you're talking to? Joy remained seated, looking up at him with a mixture of amusement and disdain. Yeah, I know exactly who I'm talking to. I'm talking to someone who thinks his last name gives him the right to walk into my studio and treat me like some sort of peasant who should be grateful for his presence. That's not what this is about, Harry snapped, beginning to pace behind his chair. This is about professional courtesy. This is about having the basic decency to conduct an interview without turning it into some sort of hostile interrogation. Hostile interrogation? Joy's voice rose to match his energy. Harry, I asked you about the impact of your charity work. That's literally the most basic question anyone could ask about charitable work. The fact that you can't answer it without having a meltdown says everything I need to know. Harry stopped pacing and turned to face her directly. You want numbers? Fine. We've reached over 10 million people through our various initiatives. We've partnered with dozens of organizations. We've raised awareness on issues that were being ignored by mainstream media. Joy leaned forward, sensing weakness. Reached 10 million people how? Through social media posts? Through press releases? And raised awareness. That's not the same as actually helping people. How many veterans have jobs today because of your foundation? How many have received mental health treatment? How many have been housed? Those aren't the right metrics, Harry said, his voice taking on a defensive tone that made him sound younger and less confident. You're trying to reduce complex social issues to simple numbers because that's easier for your audience to understand. My audience. Joy's voice was incredulous. Now you're insulting my viewers too? Harry, my audience includes veterans, working parents, people who donate their hard-earned money to charities because they want to make a difference. They deserve to know if their money is actually helping people or just funding your lifestyle. How dare you? Harry's voice dropped to a dangerously low tone. How dare you suggest that I'm somehow profiting from charitable work? You have no idea what you're talking about. Joy stood up now, matching his energy. Then explain it to me, Harry. Explain how a foundation that can't provide basic impact metrics is somehow above reproach because it's run by a prince. I've explained enough, Harry said, his accent becoming more pronounced as his anger grew. I came here to discuss important work, not to be ambushed by someone who clearly has issues with the monarchy and is using me as a punching bag for her own political agenda. Political agenda? Joy laughed, but there was no humor in it. Harry, I don't care enough about the British monarchy to have a political agenda about it. What I care about is calling out people who use their platform to grandstand without delivering results. That's enough, Harry said, starting to remove his microphone. I'm not going to sit here and be disrespected like this. In any other professional setting, this behavior would be completely unacceptable. Professional setting? Joy's voice rose to a near shout. You want to talk about professional behavior? Professional behavior would be coming prepared to answer basic questions about your work. Professional behavior would be treating the host and audience with respect instead of acting like you're doing us all some kind of favor by gracing us with your presence. Harry had successfully removed his microphone and was now holding it in his hand like a weapon. You know what your problem is, Joy? You've spent so much time in this toxic environment that you think attacking people is the same thing as journalism. Real journalists know how to ask tough questions without being deliberately hostile. Real journalists? Joy was now standing directly across from him, separated only by the small table between their chairs. Real journalists don't let people hide behind their titles when they're asked to account for their actions. Real journalists don't treat anyone, prince or pauper, like they're above scrutiny. This is exactly what's wrong with American media, Harry said, his voice filled with disgust. No respect for institutions, no respect for people who are actually trying to make a difference. Just cheap shots and gotcha moments designed to create viral clips. Joy's eyes narrowed. You want to know what's wrong with American media, Harry? Nothing. What's wrong is entitled people who think they can come on television, make grand claims about changing the world, and then get offended when someone asks them to prove it. The tension in the studio had reached a breaking point. Production assistants were speaking urgently into their headsets, trying to figure out how to handle a situation that had completely spiraled out of control. The cameras continued rolling, capturing every moment of what was becoming one of the most dramatic television interviews in recent memory. Harry looked around the studio as if seeing it clearly for the first time, his expression a mixture of disgust and disbelief. This is beneath me, he said finally, his voice carrying the kind of aristocratic disdain that he'd spent years trying to suppress in public. I shouldn't have to justify myself to someone who clearly doesn't understand the complexities of the work I do. Joy crossed her arms and stared at him with a look that could have frozen water. There it is, the real Prince Harry. Not the humanitarian, not the champion of the people, just another entitled royal who thinks the rest of us should be grateful for whatever scraps of attention he decides to throw our way. Harry's face turned red at Joy's cutting assessment, and for a moment it looked like he might actually walk off the set. Instead, he took a step closer to her, his voice dropping to a menacing whisper that the studio microphones barely picked up. You have no idea who you're dealing with, Joy. You think because you have a little television show that gives you the right to tear down people who are actually making a difference in the world. Joy didn't back down an inch. Actually, Harry, I think my little television show gives me the right to ask questions that millions of viewers want answered. And right now, they're seeing exactly who you really are when someone doesn't kiss your royal behind. This is harassment, Harry said, his voice getting louder again. This is a deliberate attempt to humiliate me on national television. I want to speak to your producer immediately." "My producer?" Joy laughed incredulously. "What are you going to do? Have him fired? Report him to the Queen?" "Harry, this isn't your kingdom. You can't just demand that people lose their jobs because they asked you uncomfortable questions." Harry's hands were shaking now, whether from anger or something else entirely. "You're twisting everything I say. You're taking my words out of context and using them to create some sort of narrative about me being difficult. I don't need to create any narrative, Harry. You're doing all the work for me. You came on this show, insulted the setup, dismissed the audience, avoided every question I asked, and now you're threatening my job because I wouldn't treat you like royalty. The only thing I'm twisting is your arm to get a straight answer." The studio had gone completely silent except for the low hum of equipment and the occasional whispered conversation between crew members who were frantically trying to figure out how to handle the situation. This was live television at its most unpredictable and most dangerous. Harry looked directly into the camera for the first time during the interview. "I want your viewers to know that this is not what was discussed before the show. I was told this would be a respectful conversation about charitable work, not an ambush designed to make me look bad." Joy stepped partially into the camera's view. "An ambush? Harry, I literally asked you about the impact of your charity work. If asking about results is an ambush, then every charity in America is under attack every single day. You're being deliberately obtuse." Harry snapped, turning back to face her. "You know exactly what you're doing. You're trying to create a viral moment at my expense. The only person creating a viral moment here is you, with your temper tantrum." Joy shot back. "I've interviewed hundreds of people about their charitable work, and somehow they managed to answer basic questions without having meltdowns." Harry pointed his finger directly at Joy's face. "Don't you dare patronize me. I've done more for veterans and mental health awareness than you could ever imagine." Joy swatted his hand away from her face. "Get your finger out of my face right now. And if you've done so much, then why can't you tell me about it without having a complete breakdown?" "Because you're not interested in hearing about it," Harry yelled, his voice echoing through the studio. "You're only interested in tearing me down because that's what gets ratings for your show. You know what gets ratings, Harry? Honest conversations with people who actually care about the work they're doing. Not whatever this performance is that you're putting on right now." Harry turned to the production staff, his voice taking on the commanding tone he'd learned from years of royal protocol. "I want this interview stopped immediately. Turn off the cameras." A producer stepped forward hesitantly. "Sir, we're live on the air. We can't just stop the broadcast." "Then cut to commercial," Harry demanded. "Do something. This is completely unacceptable." Joy looked at the producer and shook her head. "Don't you dare cut to commercial. Our viewers deserve to see how their charitable donations are being spent, and apparently this is how one particular charity handles accountability." Harry whirled around to face her again. "You are out of line, Joy. You are completely out of line, and I will not stand here and be treated like this by someone who clearly has no respect for the work I'm trying to do." "The work you're trying to do?" Joy's voice was filled with incredulous laughter. "Harry, you've been here for 20 minutes, and you haven't described a single specific thing your foundation has accomplished. Not one veteran you've helped, not one program you've implemented, not one measurable result. All you've done is talk about how important you are and how disrespectful I am for asking about it." "I don't have to prove anything to you," Harry said, his voice cracking slightly. "I don't have to sit here and be interrogated like some sort of criminal." "Nobody said you were a criminal, Harry. But if you're asking people for money, then, yes, you do have to prove that you're using it effectively. That's how charity works in the real world." Harry looked around the studio wildly, as if searching for an ally or an escape route. Finding neither, he turned back to Joy with a look of pure fury. "You want to know what I've accomplished? I've raised awareness about issues that matter. I've used my platform to shine light on problems that were being ignored. I've given hope to people who felt forgotten." "That's not an answer," Joy said firmly. "That's a press release. Give me one specific example of one person whose life is better today because of something your foundation did." Harry opened his mouth, then closed it again. For the first time in the entire interview, he seemed genuinely at a loss for words. Joy waited, the silence stretching uncomfortably long. "Take your time, Harry. One person, one specific example." "This is ridiculous," Harry finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. This entire thing is ridiculous. What's ridiculous is that you can't answer the question, Joy said, her voice gentler now, but no less firm. Harry, people watch this show because they want to support good causes. They deserve to know if their money is going to actually help people or just fund photo opportunities. Harry's composure finally cracked completely. You know what, Joy? You're right. This is America, where everything is about money and ratings and nobody cares about actually making a difference. You won your viral moment? Congratulations, you got it. He started walking toward the edge of the set, then turned back one final time. But just remember, when you're editing this to make me look as bad as possible, that there are real people doing real work to help veterans and mental health patients. And your little stunt today just made their jobs harder. Joy called after him. Harry, the only person who made anyone's job harder today was you, by not being able to talk about the work you claim to be doing. But Harry was already walking off the set, leaving his microphone on his chair and not looking back. The studio fell into stunned silence as crew members scrambled to figure out what to do next. Joy turned to the camera, her professional composure returning instantly. Well, folks, I guess that's one way to end an interview. I've been doing this for a long time, and I've never had a guest walk out just because I asked them to describe their charitable work. She paused, looking directly into the lens. You know what, though? I think our viewers learned something important today about the difference between celebrity and substance, between talking about making a difference and actually making one. Joy sat back down in her chair, smoothing her jacket. That's all the time we have for today. Make sure you subscribe to our channel and let me know in the comments what you think about guests who can't handle basic questions about their work. Until next time, this is Joy Behar reminding you that in America, nobody is above accountability, not even princes.